Since creating this channel, I have relearned to love physical media for video games, and today we're going to talk about some of the special games that I've picked up while game hunting to try and rebuild my collection of older video games while continuing to develop the best that modern games have to offer. For the past several years before that, I honestly dealt a lot with non-physical games in the form of PC games and live service. Now, there's a lot to like about digital games. First of all, they're fast, they're easy, you're downloading them. They're usually cheaper because you can find them on sale in their various shops. And I totally get it. For quite a while, I preferred the digital media because you could just get a larger hard drive or memory card and load that thing up with as many games as you like and not have to worry about finding a physical cart to slide in there. So especially if you went on a trip or something and you had Wi-Fi, then you'd be able to load up whatever you wanted from your library of games as long as you had the space to put it on. But there are issues with it. First of all, you don't actually physically own anything. And if that's ever taken off the server, or the service comes down, or it gets erased from your memory card and it's not available to download anymore, that sucker is gone forever. Meanwhile, if I have a physical game, like any of these, I always have that physical disc. I always have the opportunity to either lend that out to somebody else or reinstall it or sell it if I needed to down the road. It's impossible to sell something digital. You can't sell your digital rights to these things. So literally, once the money's sunk in, you own it for better or for worse, and there's nothing more that can be done about it until it's gone. The biggest negative to physical is that they can be damaged. It could fail to work, especially with older games like Nintendo, SNES, Genesis. They have been known to have issues. Obviously, we all know about blowing into your Nintendo systems and your game to try and get it to work. And those little cleaning sets were like glorified Q-tips with some kind of rubbing alcohol kind of solution. We've been there, we've done that if you grew up with those types of systems. That being said, physical games can be sold as used and be picked up at a discount that way. So honestly, that's what I've started to really get into, especially with older games. And as I try to rebuild my collection, I did end up purchasing a Retron 5. I do own a few older systems like Sega Genesis. However, it isn't the easiest thing to set up with a modern TV. It doesn't look the best unless you're gonna go and spend money on a CRTV and then plunk it down somewhere and then invest in expensive cables. And I like retro stuff, but I'm not that into it. I can't devote that much time, energy, and money into a system like that, at least not at this point. So I picked up the Retron 5. It plays pretty much all of the old games that I used to have, minus like Sega CD and Saturn and 32X and that kind of thing. So it covers a lot of bases with me. Between that and my backwards compatible PS3 and a few handheld systems I have like the 3DS, I can play just about anything, which was kind of a requirement for me getting back into physical collecting. So let's talk about some of the game hunting that I ended up doing. Now, one of the things I did was on Black Friday, I don't think you get great deals in too many places anymore. You do get good deals on Amazon, obviously, and some other online sellers. But for physical, there aren't a ton of good deals, and then you have to go out super early and wait in a line. They might be sold out, and then you're kind of SOL. So what I decided to do instead was go to some smaller used video game stores to see if I could pick up any discounts. The best one I ended up finding was a place called M&J Video Games. And this was a sort of mom and pop small business shop that was packed, not only with video games, but like wrestling paraphernalia and comic books and you name it, it was probably in there. But the deal that they ran for Black Friday was for a limited time, you got 50% off any sticker price as long as the game was like under $100 or something like that. And it excluded video game systems. So some of the games that I ended up picking up as part of this deal, the first game that caught my eye was Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which if you don't know about this game, it's obviously 3 games in one: Super Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy. And this game is actually out of print, even though it's a Nintendo Mario game. So the physical copies are actually pretty inexpensive. And in this case, it was already marked at $69.99, which, believe it or not, is not a bad deal. But after 50% off down to $35, I mean, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Now, I already do own a copy of this, so I'm gonna end up giving this to someone that I know, but This thing is really hard to find for less than, I don't know, 70, 80, 90, $100 in good condition. So I was really excited to pick that up, even though I already have a copy. There are several games that I picked up that were from my childhood that either I had played or been meaning to play. And when we were kids, what we ended up doing a lot was playing role-playing games, and those ended up being our favorite genre of game. Why do you ask role-playing games? Well, because back in the day, you only had so many games that you could convince your uncles and parents and relatives to purchase for you. So when you got one, you had to make sure that it was going to count and that you could put some serious time into it. So for example, games like Dragon Warrior here ended up giving you the most bang for your buck, so to speak, for the opportunities you got to convince relatives to purchase games for you. I was also able to find some dungeon crawlers like Wizards and Warriors and Iron Sword, which is Wizards and Warriors 2, the sequel. In addition, I was able to find an original Metal Gear, which if you haven't played that or seen it, it's nothing like Metal Gear Solid. It's actually like a top-down view. And the original Metal Gear was actually really ahead of its time because it would have items from different places, and it would have codes and puzzles, and actually was a pretty difficult game, at least as far as I remember. And then I kind of took a little bit of a leap of faith and ended up picking up BreakThru for the NES. And the reason I bought this game was actually because when I was a kid, we saw, I think it was an advertisement or a story on this game. I don't remember what it was. It was in a video game magazine, Electronic Game Monthly, something. And at the time, we thought it looked really cool and we never got to play it. So I'm excited to fire that one up. And at 50% off of 10 bucks down to 5, I could not pass up the opportunity, even though I have no idea if that game's any good whatsoever. Two other SNES RPGs I ended up picking up. Secret of Evermore, which is a Squaresoft game I'd actually never heard of, but for 50% off, it ended up being 21 bucks. I figured I'd give it a shot. And Illusion of Gaia, which I actually have heard of before. I may have even played a tiny bit, but another couple of RPGs for the Super Nintendo I really never got the chance to get into. Two more Squaresoft games that I do remember playing as a kid with my brother, and I was able to pick up. One is Bushido Blade, which is actually a sort of fighting game, but it's like a single strike and you die. Each of the characters has a different weapon with different advantages and disadvantages. And I remember us having some back and forths with that one for sure. And then the Final Fantasy, which I've recently got back into collecting for Final Fantasy games. I was able to pick up the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster when that came out, even though I haven't gotten to sink much time into it yet. And when we were kids, there were two Final Fantasies that ended up taking up the vast majority of our time and experience with Final Fantasy. The first one was Final Fantasy III, or Final Fantasy VI as it was known in Japan. And I know that we got to the point where we, I think, maxed out almost every single character on our save file or something like that. We played the ever-living heck out of that game. But that game got us hyped up for when we got to play a demo of Final Fantasy VIII, as I think it was included in another game. Maybe it was like Brave Fencer Musashi or something like that. And we beat that demo so many times before the game came out that when it finally did, we couldn't wait to dive right in. Now, the nice thing was they actually had a really nice copy available with the manual included, and Final Fantasy VIII, as many of the Final Fantasies were from this point onward, starting with 7, also came with a mini walkthrough, but multiple discs. There are actually 4 different discs here for Final Fantasy VIII. This is the type of package that you remember from your childhood, where it comes with a manual, beautiful artwork. You spent so much quality time playing the game. You remember the characters. I'll never forget the Gunblade and Squall. And Final Fantasy VIII, if you're not that familiar with it, was really the first crazy CG Final Fantasy. Because Final Fantasy VII was nice and everything, and it had some pretty good CG, but when it came to the game itself, it was very polygon-like, and people like spheres and octagons and stuff like that. But not so with Final Fantasy VIII. That really had that kind of detailed mapped character that was so cutting edge for the time. Another game that I will never forget from my childhood, I was able to come across at Retro Game World at a booth, was the 7th Saga for the Super Nintendo. And this game is sort of notoriously difficult because in it you can choose from a bunch of different characters, and then you can also choose one ally to go with you. But the crazy part is all the other characters also go out into the world. So the problem isn't so much that The game itself is difficult with the other enemies in the world, although they're also difficult because they scale up, but because the other characters are also going through the world and leveling up, and you'll run into them and you'll have to fight them. So what ends up happening is if you don't keep up with them, or ahead of them really, they will end up beating you because they simply out-level you. I remember getting most of the way through the game and having that happen to me, and honestly it was super defeating. But I'm hoping that now, with maybe a little bit of help from the internet and some wisdom and time, I can actually go back and finally beat 7th Saga and see if it's actually as hard as I remember it being. When it comes right down to it, there's just something to be said for physical media and having the ability to physically own, possess, sell if necessary, give away, lend to somebody else, and be able to find kind of out in the wild as part of a hunt, rather than just relying on an online service giving you the ability to re-download something. For example, this copy of Demon's Souls I picked up for the PlayStation 3. Obviously, I own the PlayStation 5 version of the game, but the PlayStation 5 version of the game doesn't come with a beautiful manual like this, with the controls and screenshots and everything that go along with it, some of the lore and tales. I mean, this adds to the game for sure. And the funny part with this is, if you notice, the original Demon's Souls has a nice little logo down here for Atlas. It actually has, from the Persona / Shin Megami Tensei series, I think that's Jack Frost, right? Is a little advertisement down there as well, which is pretty cool. Actually, that's exactly what it is, because it's advertising the original Persona coming out September 22nd, 2009, and Devil Summoner. That's kind of a nice little piece of history that you're not going to get with modern media. In $16.99 for Demon's Souls back on the PlayStation 3, and I could totally see having fun reloading this older version of the game. I have picked up some older versions of the Dark Souls series. I also have picked up older versions of the Final Fantasy series as well. They're just going to offer some things that you can't find in a digital version, except like a digital manual or something where you're still using your system and going through menus to try and look at things, as opposed to having physical media in your hands like a book, with your pictures, with your lore, your descriptions, and those types of things easily available to you. Now, some of that's just never coming back, except in the case of limited run games and those types of things, where they will pack in some stuff here, like my copy of Axiom Verge, where it comes with some nice goodies. I get it, that stuff's probably not coming back for the vast majority of physical games. At the end of the day though, I would still much rather have the ability to physically own it, to physically be able to give it to someone else to try out, say, hey, have you ever played X, Y, or Z game? And say, no, well, here, you can borrow my copy, let me know what you think. I mean, being able to go to somebody and hand over your copy of Elden Ring, or any of the Souls series, or old RPGs like the 7th Saga, I still don't think there's anything that really is like it. For its time, how ahead of its time it was, again, we'll see, maybe it's still like ridiculously hard and I can't beat it, but it's there. It's still physically there for me to be able to purchase, to throw into either the original system or some of these new retro systems, to get them on my modern TV and play through it and enjoy the game. And there's no digital way for me, minus ROMs or something that's not the most legal of ways, for me to play something like the 7th Saga, or for me to play something like BreakThru, because there's no way that someone's going to end up porting this game to a modern system. Maybe they'll pull a ROM or something like I said, but again, I just like having that physical media available. Now listen, I get it. There are a lot of pluses to digital. It's typically cheaper, it's faster, it's easier. You just buy a bigger memory card, you put in a larger hard drive, etc., and then you can just load as many games as you want. But for me, I'm back on the physical train 100%, and I'm honestly not going back. Two of the biggest games, two of the games I'm most excited to play from 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 and Sea of Stars, I haven't played either one yet. Why? My physical copy hasn't arrived yet, although I got notification today that they're shipped and they're on their way. So you better believe that when Baldur's Gate 3 finally shows up, I'm absolutely gonna load that thing up and it'll jump to the front of my list for games to play. But besides all that, it's kind of the thrill of the hunt. It's being able to go out in the wild and find these games, to be able to kind of like relive your childhood, to pick up a game like Breath of Fire, to find an old pad like the NES Max that my brother used to play. but to re-enjoy these things, to relive that childhood a little bit, and kind of see how it stacks up to modern day experiences. So like I said, I'm on the physical train, I'm not going back. Let me know in the comments down below if you've gone fully digital, or if, like me, you've gotten back into the physical side of gaming. But that's gonna do it for today's video. Hope you liked some of my finds. Let me know if you know any of these games, if you like them, if you're interested in seeing videos made about any of these old retro games, and maybe I can go through and do some of that. I'm definitely gonna play the 7th Saga in the not too distant future here. But that'll do it for today. So until next time, this is Pirates for Pirates Gaming saying thank you for watching, and I will see you there.